family discussion is not necessarily the views of all involved. The goal is to start open and honest discussion in the Christian worldview. Like all things, weigh what you hear with what you know and join us in our pursuit for the truth. Enjoy the podcast.
But hey, man, that guy can get a bag of foreskins.
And if Colton was here, he would, die on a hill. But
Sucks to suck. You're not here.
sucks to suck.
Just like Saul.
Whoa, too soon.
And don't go walking away saying this podcast says the Bible's propaganda. We say Samuel's propaganda.
And God wanted it that way.
Yes.
All right, I'd like to welcome everyone to the Second Rate Saints podcast. I'm one of your hosts here, Caleb. To my left is
Joshua. To my left is
Joel. And to my left,
me, Caleb. Josh, that was a really deep voice. Joshua.
yes.
Okay. So we are missing Colton and Stuart/Cole. So it's a sad day. But Joel, where can people find episodes where they're on them?
for all of our past and future episodes, check us out at secondratesaints.com. If you'd like to donate to the podcast, you can check us out at buymeacoffee.com/secondratesaints, or go to the link in our website. If you have a question, comment, or concern, you can email us at secondratesaints@gmail.com. Make sure to get those questions coming in, because we'll have a turd episode coming up in the near future that needs good questions. Or bad questions. We like them both.
That is true.
Yeah.
It's awesome. I do love it when people send us questions. It
It's good.
makes my day.
Peak content.
Yes. Joel.
Yeah?
You've been known to read a book or two.
Yes.
Have you done that?
I did. Are you asking the age-old question?
What have you read?
What have I read? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've been getting on some mystic stuff, some mystic Kool-Aid, and I started reading Brother Lawrence. Oh man, I'm blanking on the name.
Practicing the presence of God.
Practicing the presence of God.
Yes.
And it's kind of a collection of different letters and journal entries from his life. And just different ways that he found to connect best with Christ. And he is kind of like a pseudo mystic, like he has a lot of surrounding influence that are Carmelites and different people that would follow kind of more that esoteric mysticism path. But he kind of, from my reading of it, it seems like he just finds joy in the very simple things. Right, like he's just a dishwasher for like a good part of his life, but he's also like he's still a monk while he's doing this. But he's just washing dishes. And you know what? When his spiritual director said, "Hey, you should go do something else," he went and did something else. And then he was back to dishwashing for a little bit. It's just like this it's kind of like a slice of life monk. You're just you're kind of seeing the day to day.
I want to see the Brother Lawrence slice of life anime.
That'd be so funny, dude. That would kill. I would pay for that.
With how
Angel
much?
Studios should pick that up.
Yeah, with how much Japan loves pseudo-Catholic art, that it's not Catholic.
Oh, real Catholicism would do well in Japan.
It does. Yeah.
Not where I expected this conversation to go. As far as we'll say works of mystics that I've read, it is not my favorite.
Is it? Well, I've read this.
Yeah,
a long time ago.
Yeah, I probably should have.
It is the least esoteric mystic book I have ever come across. I'm shocked that it's classified as a mystic.
Yeah,
because it seems more about being practical, more about, hey, how can you? Well, practicing the presence of God, more about just the practical everyday, hey, when you're washing dishes, what does it mean to try to articulate God's presence in and you just swallowed into the microphone?
That was an accident. I was so careful. And then the last one.
Some crisp ASMR from Josh.
It's the simple things.
Yeah. What does it mean to do normal human necessary jobs and tasks, acknowledging that in those things you worship the creator of the universe?
I mean, Timothy Keller writes that theology of work, right? And I'd like to read that kind of to contrast this work, right?
Yeah.
And see if there's much for crossover. Because it's not, for him, it's not necessarily like find joy in work, but find joy in spite of work kind of thing, right? Like, it's not like he was, it was his calling to wash dishes or whatever. He's just enjoying his time, and he's writing these little kind of letters to his spiritual advisors and things. And the reason you kind of find those is just hagiographers will just show up and take everything a saint has ever touched and then compile it, and it's cool.
What is a hagiographer?
Specifically somebody who writes biographies about holy people or saints.
Nice.
Yeah. So, which is, hagiography is a cool thing that I'm getting into. And it's crazy that like a pope will just have a guy that's just supposed to keep track of all of his stories.
That's wild. That's like a king type stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And we still have those, which is awesome. Like even Pope John Paul, his hagiographer is still around. And he's got some pretty wild stories. And because the reason for it is he kind of follows around Pope John Paul and then follows around everybody who saw him do a miracle and goes and confirms those miracles.
Interesting.
Yeah. And one of his hagiographer walked in one day to him praying before a statue of Mary. And he's like, clearly very upset. And this is a story that
I know the story.
Didn't come out in his while he was alive, because this guy's also like kind of sworn to secrecy a little bit until it comes time to share the sainthood with the world, right? Like that's the idea. And he's like, clearly very upset and in prayer and all this kind of stuff. And it happened to be the day before his assassination attempt, right? Like the one that caused the Pope Mobile to be formed. Anyways,
Yeah.
It's crazy. Like there's some weird prophetic stuff going on. I don't know what to do with the Pope. Okay, we don't need to talk about that right now.
Anyway, you should read Brother Lawrence. It's very small. It's like what? I think when I read it, the copy that I had was like 70 pages.
Yeah, it's super thin. I just bought a copy.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Yeah, it's maybe it's because it was so practical that I never really got into it, because it's moving from St. John of the Cross to practicing the presence of God, and it's just you get hit with reality, and I kind of am enjoying this kind of more spiritualist side of
That's fair.
monastic practice, which is cool.
Nice.
Fair enough.
Yeah. That's that. If anyone's read that, drop it in the comments, because I would love to hear if you took anything huge away from that, because I don't know who else to talk to about this.
Yeah, I should reread it. Have more recent thoughts on it. But that's the what have you read section. Guys, we're going back to Samuel.
Sammy too, baby.
Sammy too.
Sammy too.
Our first episode on 1 Samuel was episode 39.
Yeah.
So Samuel's been like a big deal for us, and we're going back. We're gonna finish her up.
You
got very excited there.
I did. I don't get excited about a lot, but apparently this I do.
We're doing a new spin on 2 Samuel. 3,000 years and it's never been said like this. Come along for the ride.
That normally leads to heresy.
What up, 2 Sammy's hitting the headlines.
If you come across something new and it's like, hey, this has never been interpreted this way.
Yeah.
Run.
Just in, Saul found dead.
So previously on Samuel, everything in Samuel 1. No,
Correct. That's it.
David's rise kind of from, well, you have multiple things going on there. You have kind of Samuel the prophet, his rise. You have Saul's rise and kind of floundering, and ultimately the kingdom's going to be taken away from him. Then you have David's rise from obscurity and his interaction into the royal court and how that works, his relationship with Jonathan, his odd back and forth with Saul. Like, is he going to kill him? Is he not? He's on the run. He's this, he's that. David kind of duping, like working for enemies of the Israelites every now and then.
Yeah.
What does we do with that? And then he's kind of back in Israelite territory, and the Amalekites have come and they are laying waste to Israel. Saul and his sons gather to resist in open war, and they lose. Saul ends up taking his own life. His sons die. And that's the end of Samuel 1 for Samuel.
I mean, David's like a hired gun, and he like writes poetry, and he's got all these adventures. He should be played by Keanu Reeves. And when we do the live action,
when we do the live action,
well, yeah, I'm assuming we're making a media conglomerate. What are we doing here?
I like the idea of like the collective we in that moment was all of humanity.
All of humanity. When the human consciousness decides to recreate David's life.
When we recreate it, do we get Finn Wolford to play childhood
the youngest version?
David, yeah, and then Adam Driver to play middle-aged David, and then Keanu Reeves to play a like full adult king.
I've seen that. See, it's going to be tough if we can't get it done for a couple of years, because then Finn Wolfhard's going to look really weird as child David.
Yeah, you're right.
Anyway, back to the whole episode thing. Josh,
yes,
do you want to start us off?
Yeah,
into the deep dive that is 2 Samuel.
Yeah.
Lovely.
We'll dive right in.
We're going to be doing Samuel 1:1 to 2:4a. Everybody.
So pull out your Bibles and follow along.
We're one of the serious podcasts because we split verses in half. That's so you can tell we're scholars.
Commentaries and the Second Rate Saints podcast.
Yeah. We add letters to... No.
Go.
Sorry.
This time on 2 Samuel...
You can't say last time.
I know.
Oh, man. It's been so long.
Chapter 1, verse 1. After the death of Saul, when David had returned from striking down the Amalekites, David remained 2 days in Ziklag. And on the third day, behold, a man came from Saul's camp with his clothes torn and dirt on his head. And when he came to David, he fell on the ground and paid homage. David said to him, "Where do you come from?" And he said to him, "I have escaped from the camp of Israel." And David said to him, "How did it go? Tell me." And he answered, "The people fled from the battle, and also many of the people have fallen and are dead. And Saul and his son Jonathan are also dead."
Oof. Also, I made a mistake. It is the Philistines that kill Saul and his sons, not Amalekites. David's the one fighting the Amalekites. But anyway. Yeah. Rough. First king of Israel.
Yeah.
Right.
And him fighting the Amalekites is, if you remember from our second last episode, where David goes and rescues his wives from the Amalekites who take them from him on his like southern Israel journey. And so while he's...
And not just his wives, his men's wives, all their stuff. Roughly around 600 of them. So you're talking like a war band.
Yeah. And the Amalekites are big because, as we've talked in the Nephilim episode and in the previous Samuel episodes, these characters are an ancient enemy of Israel going back to the conquest.
Yeah.
And have theological significance of them being related to Amalek. However, Saul died to the major enemy of the current time, the Philistines, who are the ones that took the ark, then were consistent thorn in Israel's side.
Yeah.
On the coast.
And we even brought up how maybe sea people, if you know your ends of the Bronze Age history. Anyway.
Yeah. Significant players on the world stage at this time.
So cool, though.
Yeah.
Just awesome.
They buried their people in urns.
That's a big urn.
Like rocket pose. Like,
yes, I've seen that. Yeah.
Yeah. Where they're like curled up, facing upwards. Sorry, with their head facing upwards.
Clothes torn, dirt on his head.
Yep.
This is just, he's had a rough day.
Yeah, it's morning, right?
I don't know.
You don't think so?
I don't know. Clothes turned, dirt on his head. It seems that way. But then, like, when he gives his report, which we'll get into a little bit more. You know?
It seems like he's running.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's just war-torn David, we're talking about? Or, sorry, the Amalekites. War-torn Amalekite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's... I do find it interesting with the English here of how did it go? one of the commentaries points out, it's like, yeah, it's probably a little more imperative. Like, oh, like tell me the news. What is it? Like, what happened?
Yeah. Well, the fact that this guy's going to David is,
and he's ushered right to David. Apparently, at first glance on the text, it's like he's ushered straight in. He's given no, like, it doesn't even appear as though David's given like warning about him, because he's shoved right in front of him, and David's like, hey, where do you come from?
Yeah, well, because the question I would ask is, if this guy is running from the battle, why doesn't he go to like Saul's family?
Yeah.
Or like the palace, or like the other leaders or the priests.
Well,
or
in fairness, with everything that's going on and we've talked multiple times where it's Saul's court, inner court, is extremely sympathetic to David.
Yes.
And it appears to be all of Israel kind of intuitively sees this.
Yeah.
This guy may.
Yeah.
Especially if, well, we'll get into it.
Well, and that to that point, that leans that Israel's primed for him to be king. Not just that God's named him king, but that Israel's ready for that shift.
Yeah.
Yeah. Shall we continue?
I think so, because I think that's going to illuminate more of what we're talking about.
Verse 5 to 10. Then David said to the young man who told him, "How do you know that Saul and his son Jonathan are dead?" And the young man who told him said, "By chance I happened to be on Mount Gilboa, and there was Saul leaning on his spear, and behold, the chariots and the horsemen were close upon him. And when he looked behind him, he saw me and called to me, and I answered, 'Here I am.' And he said to me, 'Who are you?' I answered him, 'I am an Amalekite.' And he said to me, 'Stand beside me and kill me, for anguish has seized me, and yet my life still lingers.' So I stood beside him and killed him, because I was sure that he could not live after he had fallen. And I took the crown that was on his head and the armlet that was on his arm, and I've brought them here to my Lord."
Yeah. So the mentioning of like, hey, the inner court is leaning towards David. Even he knows, he's like, oh, I know who these are going to next. Right. Also, we do have the actual, what's implied here is he's lying.
Yes.
Right. To gain favor with David.
Yeah.
The assuming next king, right?
Because he's claiming to be an Amalekite.
Well, and he is, we're going to see. But he also doesn't, there's some more going on in there as well. But he's trying to present that, hey, I did this thing. I killed him. And he's also presenting himself in like a very good light. Like, I didn't rush upon him and stab him in the back. I even did what he ordered.
Yeah.
Which, to be fair, Saul does order his armor bearer to do it. Like, it's not a character for Saul.
Yeah.
But Saul's actual suicide is listed in 1 Samuel 31, and it's obviously, it doesn't go down the way the Amalekite here is reporting.
Well, and there's also an inconsistency, because I believe Saul falls on his sword, not his spear. So,
I saw a parallel. I don't think it's as strong as sometimes Josh would make these parallels. What do you make of it that there is a subversion going on, there is a death going on, and there's a pagan presenting the true king of Israel, the crown. In Christ, the true king of Israel is proclaimed as the king of the Jews.
Yeah.
There's a subversion going on, and there's the death. Again, I don't think there's anything there. But if nothing than the fact that it's like pattern.
I was going to go because it doesn't go well for the Amalekite.
Yeah. It doesn't go well for Pilate either.
Yeah. Well, no, what I was going to say is there seems to be more of a connection here between this Amalekite and Ananias and Sapphira.
That seems like
type
more
that
of a
out for me.
stretch to me.
So the now leader, right? Peter's taking over for Jesus. David's taking over for, again, I don't think
Peter's taking over for Jesus. Here's the argument for the papacy. Here we go.
Pope heavy episode.
as the one who in that certain circumstance was the quote unquote leader of that moment.
Mm-hmm. You mean every moment from now on
until the end of days. And there is hey, I've brought this to you, right? Who are you? What have you done? Bringing this to you. False story. And then dies as a result of the lie presented, trying to gain favor with the individual the same way Ananias and Sapphira are trying to.
I think the only line is judgment. I think that's really the only
no.
line
I'm
you
just
can draw
saying,
between.
if we're going to make parallels with the New Testament, when you said that, my first thought went to Ananias and Sapphira.
I made a parallel that I thought was like, hey, here's some 3 lines that make it. And I don't really think there's a pattern, but you might. And then you're like, no, that's too concrete. I'm going to find something even less detailed.
No, I didn't say it was, you criticized it and I said, I agree. That doesn't seem to match. And because the thought in my head was Ananias and Sapphira would be a better match.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. Not that I think it is, not that I think it's a good match.
Okay.
But I'm saying if we're going to make matches with the New Testament, it would be that story that I would go towards.
I just like the pattern of the pagan bringing the crown to the true king of Israel. That's so cool.
Well, and you see the centurion as well.
Yeah.
Would be another, he doesn't lie, but the parallel.
Yeah. What do you think David knows that Saul is dead already? No. How does he know he's lying? That's only something we know in hindsight.
Well, I think it doesn't
to read the rest of the story.
Well, yeah.
I don't think David in this story finds out he's lying.
Okay, fair enough. He's just like, how would you... I guess it has been a through line that he doesn't raise his hand against the Lord's anointed.
Yeah.
So David's a little bit like, you violated my principles, you must die.
Well,
which is
not
fair.
It's not you violated my principles. It's you violated the Lord's.
Yeah.
Yes,
right?
but that's been the reasoning for him all throughout. For Samuel. For not killing Saul.
Yeah.
And this guy just gets to do it?
Well, and Saul's attempt to kill David was a denial of God as well.
Yes.
God's will. Yeah.
Yeah, because Saul knew that that his kingdom had been taken away and given to David.
And that David had been anointed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did Saul know that he was anointed?
I think so.
Probably. That seems like a fair assumption, although we're not explicitly told that.
Yeah.
He did know that the kingdom was taken away and given to David.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Verse 11 to 16. Then David took hold of his clothes and tore them, and so did all the men who were with him. And they mourned and wept and fasted until evening for Saul and for Jonathan his son, and for the people of the Lord, and for the house of Israel, because they had fallen by the sword. And David said to the young man who told him, "Where do you come from?" And he answered, "I am the son of a sojourner, an Amalekite." David said to him, "How is it you were not afraid to put out your hand to destroy the Lord's anointed?" Then David called one of the young men and said, "Go, execute him." And he struck him down so that he died. And David said to him, "Your blood be on your head, for your own mouth has testified against you, saying, I have killed the Lord's anointed."
I mean, he does say that after he died, so like deaf ears a little bit, but fair enough.
It might be superimposing.
Yes, yeah.
But with that statement at the end, there's also, I think, more ties to Pilate with this is on your hands, of the washing of hands.
Yeah. I think it's just related to death, subversion, and pagan presenting kingship to the true king.
Yeah.
Those are the 3 ties that I would make.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those are the three lines of pattern, the 3 patterns.
Wild.
Yeah.
Well, also it's, we don't even actually know if the Amalekite did. He's just like,
What do you mean?
Like from the previous story, we know his servant was the one that did it. That
We
killed
know
Saul.
that the sword bearer for Saul is the one who
Yeah.
allowed him to fall on a sword.
Yes.
Yeah. Which
So this
means-
guy is dying only because he lied about what he did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also-
he didn't actually kill the Lord's anointed.
Yeah.
He just robbed them.
Also, at which, okay, from the author's perspective,
Mhm.
how on earth do we know which story is true?
Well,
Other
that-
than scripture specifically just telling us.
Samuel is one of the most textually critical books we have,
Mm-hmm.
just because the copies we do have are littered with propaganda
Mm-hmm.
because it's so tied into like the king narratives.
Well, and the next passage is specifically going to talk about, behold, as it is written in Jasar, in the book of Jasar. And it's like, the what? We don't have that.
Yeah.
And so, like, how much of these, especially 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, 1st and 2nd Kings,
Yeah.
how many of them are compilations of other court documents at the time?
Mhm.
Nah.
Well,
Hard to
and
tell.
then that leads into the next question of, is the author of Samuel's propaganda the intended, because we would say that this document is what God wanted in it,
Mhm.
that,
It is God breathed.
yeah, that the, whoever authored 2nd and 1st Samuel, 1st and 2nd Samuel, the theological implications of the propaganda
Mhm.
was what was important.
Yes.
Hence why in 1st Samuel we have two apparent introductions of David and Saul side by side.
In this, in the same way, I don't even know if this is a good joke. It's just on point for me to make fun of the French. In the same way that Napoleon wasn't actually short, but in the
You say Saul
in the
wasn't actually
coalition
tall?
in the coalition's mind against Napoleon, it was important for them to understand that he is a subpar leader of France.
Mhm.
So the propaganda wasn't true, but the meaning
Was important.
was important and true. I'm going to use
Sure, dude.
I get the
I
analogy.
needed a reason to take a shot at Napoleon. Okay.
Fair enough. Yeah, he's dead though, dude. Like, you're good.
Also, don't you like Napoleon?
Yeah.
He's my people.
Nah.
He is.
He's the most famous French Italian.
Yeah.
He's from Corsica, isn't he? I don't know. He's one of the two islands there.
Famous French Italian? Are we getting back into the popes?
It's not even true French.
He
Anyway,
did crown himself.
yeah.
Okay, guys, come on.
Okay. When we say
David's
this,
about to crown
when we say this
himself.
propaganda in
Yeah.
especially the historical books of the Old Testament.
Mhm.
If we say that, which we have now, if somebody's going to go, how, what do you even mean?
Mhm.
Right? Are you not insulting the idea that God inspires his word? Are you not,
Mm-hmm.
what do we mean when we say that?
Can I jump in?
Go for it, yeah.
Oh, I was going to say, there is so Josephus records that in his histories, that it was probably Benaiah who killed Goliath because of
Yeah.
the reference to Benaiah killing a champion of another nation. And David being one of his mighty men. And it was common in the ancient Near East at the time for a significant individual next to the king to have his greatness attributed to the king. Just common practice at the time. That doesn't mean that David didn't kill Goliath. This is just the point that I'm making.
It might mean that.
It might mean that. The point being is that whoever the author at the time was potentially speaking out of common practice, the way they did write kingdom biographies, to author the history of the time. The theological implication presented by God using this is that the David, as described in Samuel, was the one who Christ would be like. That doesn't mean that the theological implication is a lie, and that doesn't mean that these events didn't happen.
But if the... Okay, I'll let you finish. We'll go.
Yeah. What it means is that what is the purpose of the theological implication derived from the text compared to the actual historical occurrence?
Yeah.
In the same way, when we have the Gospels, the 4 Gospels, you have the 3 synoptics and then John's Gospel. And John doesn't include all the stuff, a lot of stuff from the other synoptics. That doesn't mean those events didn't happen, but it does shape a different image of who Christ is for important reasons.
That's true. I would like to point out that what the Gospels are and what would essentially be a history of the nation are different enough in genres that the historicity, the way one approaches the historicity of the events recorded in them would be different, right?
Yes.
Additionally, are all 3 of us of the camp, I don't actually know this, where David probably was the one who killed Goliath? Or do you think it was one of his mighty men?
I think it's nebulous enough that it's hard to say.
Okay.
But I think I like Josh's kind of thing there, where it's, well, what is the theological implication of it? Right?
I think that's true. In either system, you ask that question.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
And so
I tend to think that it's David, but that's me.
Sure.
Yeah. And I don't know enough about the exact history to be able to make a claim right now.
Okay.
But I would like it to be David.
Cool.
It also does cool things with like paralleling him going to Gath.
Yeah. Well, and that this kind of idea of, again, because what's the author's intent with this text? Because that comes up a lot in our discussions. And then layered on top of that, what is the author's intent? How is this book used by God in the canon of Scripture to present his revelation through all of it? In the same way that he uses Genesis 1 to 11, which has a similar situation, though not propaganda or political in nature. With the first 11 chapters, there is an argument over, is this historical? Or is there multiple layers of literary styles which is influencing the historical event?
I think the creation accounts are intrinsically political, but anyway.
No, what I'm saying is it's not the same as Samuel in that it's a
sure
statement of a king.
Sorry. I got triggered by something you said, and then I was like, no. Yes, I agree.
Yes, they're used for the formation of a nation and therefore related to a people group and an ethnicity.
No, because I think creation accounts like the Babylonian. Actually, in episode 240 we just released. Not 240, 220.
Yeah.
120.
Sorry, I don't know how numbers work. Dude, 240. Whoa. I doubled the number somehow.
Yeah. Double it and give it to the next person.
You guys talked about how the creation, the Enumalish, like the names of the gods would switch into like which cities.
Yeah.
And I think that there is, if the creation accounts are presentations of the earth being a temple unto God, then it would intrinsically have claims about.
This is a good point. And the statement and the fact that it's a polemic, the statement about every man and woman being made in the image of God was counter to the claim that kings were only made in the image of God. And so, yes, you are correct.
You know what sucks? The discussion that we just had about like sources and all that kind of stuff, and what does it mean about... I realized that was the discussion we were supposed to have when we talk about verse 17 and 18.
Oh, that's next.
Yeah.
Should I read it then?
Yeah, probably.
Verse 17 to 18. And David lamented with his lamentation over Saul and Jonathan his son, and he said it should be taught to the people of Judah. Behold, it is written in the book of Jashar. He said.
Yeah.
Do we know anything about that book?
It's referenced in Joshua 10:13. where it's the sun standing still.
Mm.
And it's like, and it's also written in the book of Jashar. It's like, okay, cool. That work has not survived. But like most recordings from ancient kingdoms, we don't have.
Yeah.
And so that's interesting when the Bible itself references physical works outside of itself.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
Also, if the book of Joshua references the same book that's referenced in 1 Samuel, what is that? How does that relate to the book of Joshua?
The book of Joshua is already like really hard to date.
Right? Because it means that the book of Joshua is way, way later than Joshua.
There's another option, I think.
The book of Jashar just spans hundreds of years.
No, no, that this and the book of Joshua could have, because our versions of our surviving manuscripts of Joshua and Samuel are not nearly as old as they take place in.
That's true.
That it could be an editor.
That's
later
a good
on
argument.
Adding that he knows because he's read it, and adding for scholastic purposes, adding in each of these stories, as it says in the book of Jashar.
Sure. I agree. You know what? That's a great point.
I think one of those two is.
And one of those things is like what often happens is as scribes write down, they will have an annotation on something. And then through the next scribal, that annotation actually gets brought in.
Yeah.
That happens. And so it would be interesting if the book of Joshua written, and then it's like, oh, this is also written in book of Jashar. And then that moves into the text. Fair enough. It does go to show that the 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles are to be articulated as historical, let's say synthesis in their own time, and should be articulated as products of their own time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that it becomes difficult to even call them historical a lot of times. Because, they're more works of rhetoric in a lot of ways, in the way that they position different characters.
But so were most works of history at that time, is what I mean.
Yes, I know, which is why when you say something like it's a historical book, it actually gets confusing to the modern reader.
I suppose.
Especially when then you turn around and go, and maybe it's not all true.
Like the best of ancient history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
unlike Herodotus, Samuel has God in its back corner.
I also don't know about, and maybe it's not true. I don't know.
Well, no, it's difficult when you classify something as historical genre, which in our day and age is understood to be a factual retelling.
That's true. Yeah.
Whereas if you look at Herodotus, where he's like, 3 different versions of this story I've heard so far. Here's all of them. I think this one's true because it's the coolest. Right? And it's like, I do history that way, but not everyone should be doing history that way.
Correct me, but it seems like historical narrative, which is what the genre that Samuel's written in, is somewhere between simply a list of historical events and historical fiction.
Historical fiction.
Can I retry? Can I reframe?
Yeah. I'm not saying it's close to historical fiction.
It's somewhere between a list of historical events and revisionist history. Revisionist history is not fabricated in of itself.
Yes.
It's bending the story to tell a narrative. And some of those bends are pretty aggressive.
Yeah. Okay, then
is that fair?
After revisionist history is historical fiction.
Yes.
Well, I mean, that's our biggest thing with 1 Samuel. And if Colton was here, he would, die on a hill. But
sucks to suck. You're not here.
Sucks to suck.
Just like Saul.
I'm sorry.
Just like Saul. No, but we had the discussion.
2,000 years.
3,000 years. It still hurts. No, the conversation of whether he's a tragic character or kind of just a flawed character. The reason that's even an argument is because as this book is being transmitted through history and edited, different opinions are arising, right? Whether they are framing him, rhetorically in a tragic sense or in a kind of villainous sense.
Mhm.
So the answer is yes.
The answer is yes, depending on who you are and when you are.
Well, and the
Use
we
your
can
words.
move on after this, but just like God, if you're worried that God, like the fact that it's edited or propaganda is inserted into it, or it's not telling you exactly the events that occurred
Mhm.
to hopefully help. God inspired the author. God can inspire an editor.
And if you're going to fight us about it, canonization happens in like 300, so take it up then. And
Later.
later than that, if you really want to.
Yeah.
And don't go walking away saying, this podcast says the Bible's propaganda. We say Samuel's propaganda.
We say elements of Samuel.
Elements of Samuel.
And God wanted it that way.
Yes.
And here's the other thing. It's like, oh, the Bible wants me to believe something? Yes, it does. So let's continue, I guess.
Book of Jasher, if you find it in your backyard, keep it there.
Oh, dude.
Anyway, moving on to some songs. What
Yes.
are we, Tolkien? Let's go.
No, David's Tolkien. Okay, David's talking. Sorry, there was a pun there. I'm not the funny member of the podcast. It's Joel.
No,
And
it's
he's
so
not
good.
making any jokes. No, sorry. Right now,
Oh, yeah. Fair enough.
you just did make a
They're
joke.
laughing with me, guys. Don't worry. I'm fine.
I'm sorry, Joel. I want to publicly apologize
Oh
for the
my
things
goodness.
I just said.
This is barely public. Tens of people will see this.
Hear it.
Hear it. Okay.
Verses 19 to 27. Your Glorio. Whoa, sorry. I started strong. He said, your Glorio Israel is slain on high places, on your high places. How the mighty have fallen. Tell it not in Gath. Publish it not in the streets of Ashkelon, lest the daughters of the Philistines rejoice, lest the daughters of the uncircumcised exult. You mountains of Gilboa, let there be no dew or rain upon you, nor fields of offerings, for there the shield of the mighty was defiled. The shield of Saul, not anointed with oil. From the blood of the slain, from the fat of the mighty, the bow of Jonathan turned not back, and the sword of Saul returned not empty. Saul and Jonathan, beloved and lovely, in life and in death, they were not divided. They were swifter than eagles, they were stronger than lions. You daughters of Israel, weep over Saul. Who clothed you luxuriously in scarlet, who let ornaments of gold on your apparel. How the mighty have fallen in the midst of battle. Jonathan lies slain on your high place. I am distressed for you, my brother Jonathan. Very pleasant have you been to me. Your love to me was extraordinary, surpassing the love of women. How the mighty have fallen, and the weapons of war perished.
I wonder if actually, like, if you were to trace this back, like when we say, "Oh, how the mighty has fallen," I've read this. Is this where we get that saying?
Yes.
That's awesome.
It is, because 48 of the 50 most common idioms in English are from the Bible.
And probably King James specifically.
Yes.
That's awesome.
And I believe 14 of them are from Ecclesiastes alone.
Love it. Yeah, rough. I mean, this is a devastating blow to the morale of a young nation.
It's kind of a diss track and a eulogy put together.
Yeah.
I know we just talked about how a bunch of Samuel's propaganda.
Okay, stop saying it.
But this one hypes me up a little bit.
yeah.
Well, no, but David's character to be able to speak highly of Saul
Yeah. As the Lord's anointed.
as the Lord's anointed, but also the fact that he states that Saul and Jonathan, in life and in death, they were not divided.
Okay. I had a thought, but
Say it.
no, we should stay on the text.
Say it.
Okay.
You had a thought in real time.
If you're going to go crazy archetypal interpretation of
Yes.
the Old Testament as an archetype for the new,
The women of Israel mourn.
No, the Saul, David, Absalom relationship.
Mm-hmm.
If we're going to overlay, this is dumb what I'm about to do. Okay. Don't do this type of stuff. This is not allegorical or typology. This is just insanity. Old Testament Judaism is articulated as Saul, as it still failed what it did. However, it was God appointed, and it achieved to the degree it was possible.
Yep.
What it set out to do. Christ fulfills actually the thing that the first king could not do, what Judaism could not do. That is authentic Christianity.
Yes.
Absalom are the heretics that come up and usurp and claim as though they're the next step. They're not actually anointed.
Yeah, that's good.
Anyway,
I don't think you have to say that's a typology or anything. You can just say that's how the
Fun
world
image.
functions.
a fun image.
Hey, I found a schema
Fun
that
image.
works in the world.
Well, and like, because again, you're connecting it to the death of Christ.
Mhm.
You have where Jesus says, "Weep, daughters of Israel," right? At his death, and you see David say the same thing about Saul.
The reason why I bring this up is you pointed out how much reverence and like
Yes.
respect and how much David does view Saul as like, no, he is important. He was the Lord's anointed. He is like
The same way Jesus
not
loves
lessen
Israel.
it. Yes.
Yeah.
The same way it's like, no, this is still a divinely appointed institution. This is still good.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's
Are we going to talk about Jonathan and Samuel? Or
the other major evidence.
Yeah.
So we talked about it in the first Jonathan and David.
People are going to hate this episode.
What are you talking about? We talking about Pope? Talking
Propaganda.
about Napoleon?
Propaganda and
We undermined the validity of Samuel as a book.
Anyway,
history remembers Jonathan and David as very good friends.
25b and 26. Jonathan lies slain in your high places. I am distressed for you, my brother Jonathan. Very pleasant have you been to me. Your love to me was extraordinary, surpassing the love of women.
Lost in translation. I don't know what to tell you, man. That's awful suspicious in my books. But
I would like to do a word study on what is meant by love there, but I don't have the time right now.
yeah,
We're of the pattern. We don't think they were in a romantic relationship, right,
No.
Josh?
You're
well, I mean, we discussed that.
We talked about this
for
outside of the
Samuel 1.
podcast.
yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
I think it's very similar to C.S. Lewis's quote about male friendship being sometimes
You mean pen pals?
C.S. Lewis had a quote about male friendship being good in a different way for different reasons. Hey, do you not know the quote?
No, nobody knows the quote.
You look it up. Yeah, we are of the position that
Delete this.
no, this is too funny. Male friendship, you mean pen pals? I think
I just got it.
I think I've peaked in humor, guys. No,
that sucks.
we're of the position that David and Jonathan had a very tight and close friendship. It has become popular in recent times to read our views and I shouldn't say our many people have started to read our culture's views and their own revisionist history back into his historical characters and like, oh, you know, this, not even history. Well, some people even do it with fiction where the author has died and they're like, oh, this author in their fiction was actually trying to put these two characters there, you know, they're friends, wink.
Yeah.
And they'll say, oh, you know, David and Jonathan are that.
You know.
I think that's a product of our time today in the West because people in our culture are fixated on it.
Yeah.
I don't think it's obvious. I don't. Yeah.
I definitely don't think you get the amount of information to even make a claim like that. But like you said, a lot of people read what they want to read into the Bible. So.
Yeah. And it's whatever gets you a PhD at a liberal college, I guess.
Yeah, fair enough.
Mm.
Yeah.
Need to write a thesis. We'll make it up. Anyway, that is one of my qualms about doctorates and PhDs. Where it's like, I need a master's thesis, or I need a thesis, so I have to make something up. I don't even care if I believe it. Just write it.
Yeah, it just has to be original.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
it's like, that doesn't seem like a good way to do biblical studies, right?
It
is what it is. I knew one guy
I can't find it.
Here's the thing. Having biblical studies recognized as a literary science kind of requires that we do fall into some of the same requirements that other literary sciences do. And I'm okay to do some of that.
Yeah.
That being said, it feels like every time there's a new like feminist theology or a new like intersectional theology, it gets to be like there's almost so much expansion on niche topics that nobody can properly be an expert enough to disprove other theories.
Yeah.
I can't find the quote, but the quote goes something like, and again, I'm heavily paraphrasing here, but like marriage and that sort of love is great, is one of the highest depictions of relationship with God. But nothing beats sitting with 4 friends after a walk in front of a fire with a whiskey and a cigar.
Fair.
And having that communication and he's not, in his quote, he wasn't saying one was better than the other, but he was saying how deep, and he speaks a lot in The Four Loves and in, what is it?
Surprised by Joy?
Surprised by Joy, a lot about friendship as being
different but good.
Different but as good.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of that in what David is saying. Yeah. Because there's a thing with Paul where he talks about how celibacy is as viable of a choice for a Christian
with its own gifts.
With its own gifts, because in a sense, living for the church out of celibacy is being married to Christ. You're living out your marriage in that symbolism. And to read back that every mention of love in the Old Testament has to be sexual or marriage based is to, again, heighten marriage and that type of relationship above all the other types of love. So not only is it anachronistic and not only is it a product of our time, but it's also committing the same crime.
Yeah. I agree. It's a sad poem though, man.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he knows how to write music and lyrics.
Music we don't know. Assuming it's pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, because he played the harp.
Yeah. It angered.
Enough to fight off a demon.
I love the Psalms that are like played to the tune of, and then it's like another song we don't know.
This is helpful to no one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's finish her up.
Shall we continue?
There's a new king in town.
Samuel. 2 Samuel chapter 2, verses 1 to 4a. After this, David inquired of the Lord, "Shall I go up into any of the cities of Judah?" And the Lord said to him, "Go up." David said, "To which shall I go up?" And he said, "To Hebron." So David went up there, and his 2 wives also, Ahinoam of Jezreel, and Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. And David brought up his men who were with him, everyone with his household, and they lived in the towns of Hebron. And the men of Judah came, and there they anointed David king over all the house of Judah.
New king in the south. Hebron, my city. Caleb took it when he was old.
Yes.
And you're expecting that inheritance yourself.
Yeah, I'm expecting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, he took
Based on a first name basis. Yeah, it's kind of
took your city and my nation. Anyways,
it's the capital, pseudo capital of Judah, right? Cultural and economic center of Judah at the time, we are assuming. Additionally, it is interesting how David is he's continuing to inquire of the Lord like he has done in the past in his more successful moments, like just earlier when he's, hey, do we chase after the people that took our stuff or not? Do we stay in this city? And it's like, hey, no, Saul's going to come for you. Okay, then run away.
Yeah. Which is in the law what the king was supposed to do when they went to battle or when they went to do things.
What do you guys make of the king is specifically now in Deuteronomy 17:17 when it's laying out the laws of the king, he's not supposed to have more than one wife.
Yes.
He has two wives explicitly mentioned here in the text.
Yeah.
But they made before he was king. Or are we going to be of the pattern that Deuteronomy was probably not written until after this?
Oh, I don't like that opinion.
Okay.
That gets.
I don't know if I'm of that opinion.
Josiah's reform gets really rough. With that.
There's a couple ways.
Like you can say he's not king yet.
Well,
that makes sense.
Well, he gets more wives.
Yeah.
As he becomes king.
Yeah.
He also took Abigail out of responsibility for having caused the events which had Nabal killed.
This is true.
And so she would have died in the desert alone. And
let's not overemphasize it, but it'd be bad.
Yes. And so he's taking the responsibility and so marries her. Two, a thing we've mentioned on the podcast before was as you go from Abraham onward into history, there's a decline in polyamory because of the cultural need for men to have multiple wives because of being a nomadic culture. And then as they move into cities and stuff, you see polyamory disappear, except in the kings who fell to the same sins as the other kings around them who had taken harems.
Yeah. It is interesting that, and we're going to be getting into it over our course of 2 Samuel, that is the source of David's heartache. The majority of his latter life is the effects of him going against Deuteronomy 17:17. That is no small thing.
No. Yeah. And it is the source of Solomon's fall away from God.
And 17:17 specifically says, and he shall not acquire many wives for himself, lest his heart turn away. Nor should he acquire for himself excess silver and gold. It seems to be more targeted, if anything, that applies more to Solomon than it does.
Well, and that's what's interesting because God gives him silver and gold for asking for wisdom. So,
thoughts?
I mean, did you know that that's kind of a problem we have right now? Is polygyny guys taking over? Like Christian polygamy is like kind of becoming a thing again.
Yeah.
It's a little bit rough. I saw some Mike Winger stuff on it, but these kind of verses are unfortunate, right? Because then you're challenged with the idea of like, you wouldn't let the king of Israel on your board at your church.
Well, I wouldn't let him for multiple reasons.
Yeah. Fair enough. Like,
he is a warlord.
He
does tend to solve problems by killing tens of thousands.
But hey, man, that guy can get a bag of foreskins.
Yeah, quicker than you could bat an eye. You know, this guy. If that's what you need at your board meetings, man, what are we talking about? No, the Christian polygamy stuff has gotten a little bit out of hand.
I mean, and how many people are we talking about?
Usually just one dude. That's not the question that you were asking me.
Because it's growing, but like how small is this idea?
I think it has a bigger impact online than it does in.
Oh yeah, no, 100%.
Yeah.
It's a small group of loud people.
Yeah.
But unfortunate because they'll point to verses like this and say like, see, God's fine with it. And it's like, read the story, man.
Yeah.
God's not fine with a lot of stuff that David does.
Yeah.
Man after God's own heart in the sense that he follows his directives. But
and he repents.
Yeah. And I think it's difficult as well if you don't if you don't look ahead and also see that Josiah's reform was kind of started by them finding the book of the law.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. And so the idea that he isn't necessarily operating off of Deuteronomy's principles, but rather Samuel's principles that he was kind of like anointed with and brought up in.
Do you think, sorry.
Yeah, go for it.
Who crowned David? Abiathar or Samuel? Or was it like the chief of Judah? It doesn't say, it doesn't really matter, but those would be the three people that I would think most likely.
Samuel's dead.
Is he? I thought he doesn't die until a little bit.
Oh, I thought he was already dead. I thought he dies in 1 Samuel.
You're probably right, and I'm an idiot.
Yes, because 1 Samuel ends with Saul raising him from the dead.
No, you're right.
Yes.
I'm dumb.
So maybe it was Samuel, but that would have been another problem with the
for whatever
medium.
You're right. That's funny.
Coming back from the dead.
They raised from the dead to crown him.
For whatever reason, you and I, Josh, did that episode together. For whatever reason, I thought we still had to do that story.
Yeah.
We talk about that story a lot.
Yes.
Saul and Samuel come back from the dead to talk to each other. No, sorry.
Like at the end of Star Wars when Darth Vader and Yoda and Obi-Wan are there at the celebration of
the ghost.
Anakin because he's good again.
Yeah, that was a retcon for the new movies. Anyways,
you don't believe in redemption?
Sorry,
I hate this. What kind of joke was that?
My
Redemptive
point
plan
was
of George
you were
Lucas.
making a joke about them coming back and hanging out the same way that at the celebration of the destruction of the Empire, Anakin just shows
Okay,
up.
let's do something. Let's talk about the Bible. Okay, so Caleb's question about who made David king is unfortunately still a valid question.
Unfortunately.
In a weird twist of phrase, because Samuel anointed David, you could kind of say it was Samuel.
According to our AI overlord Gemini.
What?
Hold on. Are you
using AI?
Do you study for this using AI or just answer questions really fast?
No, I just wanted to see what the answer was.
Okay.
According to
what? Not could be. Is. Carry on.
It's our AI overlord. They don't lie. It was the elders of Israel.
That's a cold take.
Also, it couldn't be of Israel because it's just Judah.
It's just
so
Judah.
it's wrong.
It can't be. AI's wrong. AI's a worse biblical scholar than I am, and that's saying something.
It does say they anointed, so it's got to be a plural. Men of Judah. So assuming tribal heads of Judah. I guess if I just read verse 4 a little more closely, I could have answered my own question. Thank you, everybody.
Sorry. This is taking from 2 Samuel 5-8, where he does become king of both parts.
Yeah.
Cool.
King of the South.
This is David, king of the South.
I like that.
Yeah, it just says the men of Judah anointed David as king in Hebron.
Abiathar may have been there. I don't know.
Yeah.
Cool.
Whoa.
That was our first episode in 2 Samuel. That was pretty chaotic, but I had a fun time.
It was good. We got into the papacy. We got into the nuances of male friendship.
Emails kind of ruined that.
We're going to get some messages probably from this one.
If you got some thoughts in real time, comment.
Somebody's going to tell us we are not qualified to read 2 Samuel because we're...
The more I'm thinking about it...
We're propagandists.
Sorry, I cut you off. Go.
It's okay.
Can I...
Yes.
Okay, perfect. The more I think about the pilot thing, the more it's...
Cool.
Making sense.
Okay. Joel.
What, that the king of the Jews is crowned by a pagan?
Mm-hmm.
Can we call David king of the Jews?
David, king of the Jews? Yeah.
King of Israel.
Well, right now he is of Judah, so
David,
like Jews.
Yeah, fair
David,
enough.
king of the Jews could be Samuel 5 5 where he's crowned.
Dave, we'll say
Of Israel.
Dave, King of the Jews.
Dave.
It's a very slight change, but it's funnier.
I think it's
King of the South.
yeah, King of the
Yeah. And then we do David, King of the Jews for Samuel 5.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll talk about that
Maybe
one.
every episode for 2 Samuel could
Oh,
be David,
no.
King of something. That won't be hard to track at all.
Joel, please do the media plug so we can end the podcast.
King of the Lord of the Fries.
No. At the very last episode.
We already have an episode called Lord of the Flies.
It's
For-
about Goliath.
For David and Goliath.
Which is not a helpful name.
No, because if you search up,
Lord
David
of the
and
Flies.
Goliath. Yeah.
You look up Lord of the Flies or a school project, and you got our podcast.
We're kidding.
I tell you what else you got, an F. Yeah. This has been, are we done?
Please.
This has been Second Rate Saints with Caleb, Josh, and Joel. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can hit us up at secondratesaints@gmail.com. I also use the chat feature on our website. Which, Josh, you all right?
Are we done?
Finish the episode.
The secret of podcasting is subtle cues with your host. If you'd like to support the podcast, this is a great time to ask. Check us out at buymeacoffee.com/secondratesaints to kind of support our future. Yeah, it's been fun.
God made you special,
And he loves you very much. Just showed you pictures of hot dude rats.